Welcome, finance and marketing leaders, to our latest B2B in Black video series. What good looks like in a post-COVID world. I'm Thad Kalo, CEO of Business Online and founder of B2B in the Black, an executive forum that aligns B2B finance and marketing leaders to unlock growth. And today, I'm truly excited to introduce to you today, Jay Gaines. And if you don't know Jay, well, you should. As a former CMO of Serious Decisions and now Forrester, Jay is probably one of the most well-networked, insightful, knowledgeable marketing leaders on the planet. That's right, I said it. With over 20 years marketing experience as an executive and a trusted advisor to some of the most successful B2B brands in the world today. Jay, welcome.
Thad, thank you so much for having me and for that amazing introduction.
Yeah, hopefully you're feeling no pressure. The bar is going to be set high.
No pressure.
Fantastic. Well, let me do us a favor and try to set the stage for our conversation today. In this post-COVID world, we've talked about the fact that leadership must create new marketing strategies and tactics that meet the moment, right? That turn these challenges into opportunities. And our belief is that incremental thinking will no longer cut it, right? Businesses need a long-term plan to create true digital transformation, the way they need to redefine what good looks like in this post-COVID world. And as we discussed, Jay, before we got on today, you believe buyers have significantly changed the way they buy, right? And My first question to you is a very simple one. What does this mean to us as marketers, Jay?
It means that there's more pressure than ever, speaking of pressure on us as marketers, because the nature of those changes in buyers really puts even more weight on us. And it's really a continuation of a trend that's been going on for 15 years as more and more of the buying process has happened in digital channels. That's just really accelerated, but it's accelerated in pretty unique ways that kind of create new obligations for us as marketers to find more creative ways to engage our audiences in really relevant ways, in ways that are frankly delightful for our audiences. And while that obligation has always kind of been there, I really think it's increased a lot.
There's so much there to unpack. And let me just start with like the first piece of this, which is, how big is this change, right? We've talked about the continuum over the past 10 to 15 years that you just mentioned, that we're heading in this direction. And then obviously COVID accelerated everything. But is leadership fully realizing the gravity of this moment?
It's a good question. I would say, it's a mixed bag, obviously. I think some leaders get it. And I talk to a lot of CMOs, as you know. I've got this amazing network of fellow marketing leaders who I engage with through a variety of groups, but also just weekly, I'm having one-on-one conversations. And some of those CMOs are really struggling with the leadership in their company, kind of getting this in general. Now, everybody that I talk to, their leadership gets the fact that, yes, a lot of the buying journey is happening in digital channels now. That's understood. But what COVID has done, kind of the acceleration of this and the way that it's changed it, is something that CMOs are struggling to get leadership on board with, because a lot of leadership, frankly, are looking at marketing investment right now and over the past year and saying, wow, well, this is a really great opportunity to save a lot of money, because one of those big giant line items, in particular live events, seems to have gone away. That was super expensive. Glad we don't have to do that anymore, so we can take that money back. And a lot of CMOs are saying, no, not the case at all. I still need that money. I just need to apply it in very new ways. So there is a little bit of a gap there, but for the most part, I think that there's, in this moment, most leaders really do understand, okay, things are changing. I might not understand all the ways it's changing, so I'm open to hearing about it. And that's what I'm hearing from most marketing leaders, that their leadership is kind of open to hearing from them how things are changing and what needs to change. Although there still is this idea that's pretty prevalent out there that, hey, we can save some money right now on marketing because of the lack of live events that have been so expensive in the past.
Yeah, and let's unpack that for a second, because I think there's one piece of this conversation that we should definitely advance around what we should be doing. Like what are the next opportunities, and what are some of the bold moves that have been enabled based off of this moment in time with COVID. But maybe I'd like to see if you've got any insight, Jay, around some tools or opportunities around how we inform leadership so they can understand the gravity of the moment and can operate in an aligned fashion, right? You may have a sales-driven CEO. So there's a different conversation you're going to have with her and talking about how positioning, this moment from a digital perspective. And if it's more of a product driven CEO, you may have a different conversation with him or her as well. So I'm wondering, have you seen anyone do this well? And how do you think about creating this level of alignment that's so critical to getting the resources and frankly, the metrics aligned to understand what success looks like?
Another great question. And I think there are differences between sales-driven CEOs and product-driven CEOs, obviously, but a lot of people don't see that. So in the B2B world, frankly, I think that there are far more product-driven CEOs out there, but sales-driven is pretty common as well. So I'm going to start with sales-driven. When you have a sales-driven CEO, what I have found works really well, both in my own experience, but again, advising a lot of CMOs over time, is to talk about what you want to do, where you want to invest, how to measure in the context of sales productivity, right? And that's okay to do. It doesn't mean that you're taking a back seat to sales, but it's giving you the best opportunity to kind of open them up to hearing what you have to say. And when I talk about sales productivity, what I mean by that is, okay, we have salespeople right now, and this is pretty universal, who are struggling to engage their targets as effectively as they would like to. They have sales cycles that are pretty disrupted because the buyer's journey is a little bit different. Now, responsibility within that, like if you've been targeting certain decision makers and influencers in a purchase decision, those people haven't necessarily changed, but the way that they engage with each other has changed somewhat because, in my experience, good salespeople, good marketers are always looking for that internal champion, that person who's going to sell inside the company for them, right? And trying to influence them as much as possible and get them on board. That person's ability inside their business to engage their peers, their superiors, has changed somewhat in this digital world. It's become a bit challenging to get people's attention. So that means partially arming them in the right ways, with the right information, with the right assets and tools so that they can sell for you internally, without necessarily leaning on the ability to have hallway conversations and stuff like that anymore. So you've got to kind of think those things through. But if you're talking about, hey, we're talking about how do we increase sales productivity, right? How do we reduce sales cycle lengths, increase their ability to productively engage with the people they need to engage with, get their internal champions armed with the right things. In my experience, those sales-driven CEOs will kind of latch onto that and open up and want to hear what you have to say and will come along pretty easily with that. For product-driven CEOs, it's more challenging. A lot of B2B companies, especially if you have a founder CEO, they tend to have a technology background, a product background. They had a great idea. So a lot of evidence I find is helpful wherever you can get it, because the common scenario is a company launches and grows on the back of some great products before they're investing really heavily in marketing. So there's this assumption that, hey, that's going to continue, right? We're doing great, or we have done great. Now, if you're struggling, that's a different story that I'll talk about in a second. But assuming the company's been growing well and having some great performance, how do you all of a sudden step up and say, hey, we got to really start investing in the right ways of marketing, doing things a little bit differently, especially if you're still on that nice growth trajectory? The best thing to do is bring evidence to the table. And there's endless evidence. Pretty much every unicorn out there, except very recent unicorns, have gone through an inflection point in their growth where things begin to flatten out or sometimes even decline. And it's a pretty common kind of time frame within which that happens. It's not universal by any stretch, but you can point to kind of these inflection points in a business growth. One of them is right around the $50 to $100 million range, right? We've really kind of ramped up and doing great, but look, things are leveling out. Why is that? Sometimes it's more like a $500 million range where that begins to happen. And you can show examples of other companies where that's happened and speak to the fact that, look, we can avoid that ever happening to us or minimize that happening to us. Or if it is happening to us right now, here's how we can break through that and continue to accelerate growth or maximize growth for the business. And the way we do that is by saying, okay, we have great products that are going to continue to sell. We have a product roadmap that's going to continue to evolve. But we really need now to dig into our audiences. And this is where it becomes important for the marketing leader and the marketing organization to become the internal customer expert, right? and get into, do we really understand needs as they exist within our customer base and how they're evolving? Clearly, we had great product market fit for a while there, but we can't just assume that that's going to last forever because everything is changing so fast. Agile business is real and it's customer driven.
Yeah, let's press on that for a second. So first of all, I want to summarize something that seems so simple and easy, but I think is so big in potential and magnitude, which is identifying your audience, right? Whether it be a CEO or board, and understanding where they come from. And then from there, instead of saying, hey, marketing is important, like understand how important we are, give us budget, position your needs and wants and vision against how they see the world, right? Sales productivity or the evidence-based approach to the product marketers. I just think that's, frankly, simple yet, but so important and brilliant. And then the second piece is you talk about truly understanding the needs of your customers. So I want to press on that for a second, because there's a whole, conversation around, customer obsessed organizations are going to win, right? And mapping the buyer's journey from the very first ad to sale to retention and growth is critical. And I think we all know that. But how have you seen the best go out there and truly unearth those insights to do something unique and bold to differentiate to win? What does that look like?
It's evolved. It's changed a little bit over time. So at Sirius, I played a big role in developing a lot of our research on how to be audience centric, right? There was a whole group of analysts. I'm not taking credit for the whole thing, but it was what you were describing, which everybody knows now. At the time, it was new, but you've got to map that buyer's journey. You've got to build good buyer personas, right? You've got to really understand needs mapping and all of that. Now, all that stuff is still there. It's table stakes now.
Yep.
But I'll say one thing first, a buyer persona, right? A little bit different from a customer persona. And B, you want to make sure it's an actually usable document. And that's where I see a lot of companies running into trouble, because I've seen tons of buyer personas, and some of these things are 15 pages long and really fascinating reading, but not actually all that useful when you think about how do we now translate the insights in this document into better messaging, a better tactic mix, better, content ideation, and all of those things. The gaps usually in buyer personas, it's they're too long and too wordy. You want to kind of narrow it down to 8 to 10 bits of really important information. And the really important bits of information that are usually off of that are the bits of information that would seem obvious when you think about them, but still are gaps. And they tend to be more emotive kinds of things. And that's kind of part of the evolution I'm going to talk about in a second. Certainly, there are things that are overlooked, like where do they go for trusted information? What are their watering holes, as we call it, the places that they trust and go to? Who influences this audience that isn't us? And can we influence those influencers? So influencer relations is key, but having that in the persona is really important. Also, understanding their challenges on a bit of a deeper level that aren't just about how your product helps them. So for example, in my current business, we are targeting CFOs and other finance leaders right now. And we help do things like collections and AR automation and cash flow forecasting in an automated way. And you can talk about, cash flow forecasting is tedious, it's error prone, that creates problems and challenges for CFOs. All of it is true, and that's fairly obvious. But when we look at building personas, we go deeper than that and get into really what's at the heart of what CFOs really want. And there's a couple things there. One is they are becoming strategic partners in the business in ways that they haven't been in the past. And CFOs have always had a seat at the table, a voice with the CEO and the board. That hasn't changed. But when I say strategic partner of the business, it's becoming about more than helping the company understand how to protect the bottom line and what the financial health of the business looks like. CFOs are increasingly being asked to be enablers for agile business, where investment can't be predicted at the beginning of the year in a planning or financial planning process. They're being asked to give real-time financial context, leverage working capital in entirely new ways, give context for the CMO and the head of sales and the head of ops and engineering to better understand that, hey, we have capital to work with here. Let's be aggressive and take advantage of opportunities. We've come up with this phrase that we say, CF no to CF go, right? And what we found was CFOs, the thing they like least about their job is they're the ones who have to say no to everything. They would say, yeah, it really bugs me that I'll have people come to me with great ideas. But you know what? I know I got to say no because of X, Y, and Z. That's not ideal. And we figured out that a lot of times X, Y, and Z is, we don't really have great visibility into our, working capital, which influences our ability to make real-time changes to CapEx and things like that. So we speak to that. We also speak to CFO's desire to kind of be part of the front of the office more, right? Less kind of accounting oriented, more business strategy oriented. And again, that comes into, how do we operate in real time as an agile business with financial certainty so we can be more aggressive and compete more effectively. That speaks to kind of deeper desires. So what I'm saying is knowing your customers on that level and saying, okay, well, there's not an obvious direct link between our product and that need they have. We can still speak to that need and use that in ways to engage them in ways that are in some ways emotional. And that then gets into kind of the new set of things that I think marketers should be doing. Create a hero's journey, but really give it attention and turn that hero's journey into an evocative story, right? Actually write out this story. I spent time when I first joined Tesorio writing a story with a main character and challenges that she was encountering and how she overcame that. It was typical hero's journey stuff, but it was emotional and evocative and really tried to dig into it. And that now is translated into a ton of messaging, videos that we're creating, and a better ability to engage audiences. So I might have gone off track then.
No, I love it. Because, some of the things that I'm pulling out of this, Jay, is, especially in the persona pieces, obviously the truly know your watering holes where folks get trusted information, but more so this notion of humanizing your ability to connect with these folks because it's so hard to get their attention. If you can connect with something that's real and emotional to them, you got a shot, right? And then from there, what does that journey look like? What is hero's journey? How are they front and center in that journey? And I think, those are sometimes the things we miss, especially in a sales-driven organization. We have a sales-driven CEO, right, who wants to sell, or a product-driven one who wants to put the product at the forefront of the messaging, features, and functions.
Exactly. Because the point is, one of the things that's true today is everybody has great content. There's not a whole lot of bad content out there, and there's tons of it, right? So chances are, if you have a content idea out there, somebody else has had that idea. And even if you design it a little bit better, write it a little bit better, that's not going to be the thing that's going to allow you to really break through. So you've got to start thinking about kind of making emotional connections and how do I engage in ways that aren't just about kind of providing useful information, right? That's always valuable and it's table stakes, but a lot of useful information is out there. So in some ways, I view what's happening in marketing right now is we're kind of getting back into the creative side of marketing, kind of, again, the evocative and emotional side. And I'm not talking about being manipulative. My choice, the way I like to do this is through humor. I'm not looking to make CFOs cry. That might be a valid approach. Or
maybe a tough thing to do.
Exactly. But if I can engage them through humor and get them to relate and be like, okay, I'm understood by this company. They kind of get something about me that I can really relate to. That's going to earn their attention and hold on to it.
Well, think about this, right? I mean, what you just said, which is super interesting in this world of explosion of tech and data and intent and all those things that are so important to marketers. Right now, we spent a good, 8 to 10 minutes talking about human beings and emotion and connection and differentiation before we even talked about, all of this tech, which is, in my opinion, important. But, you've got to have a balance of both. And let me ask you this, just still staying on this topic for 1 second, who out there is doing it really well and who is doing something unique and different to the sense that, have you ever even seen anyone right now go too far in this? Because I can personally tell you, I've not seen anyone go too far in trying to extend themselves to connect emotionally, because B2B marketers are so risk averse.
We are risk averse, that's for sure. But I have seen companies go a little bit too far, or at least come off as awkward. And I'm not.
Would that be our goal? Is to come off as awkward and just back it down one half a step, and then we're there.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. You're not going to burn yourself permanently unless you do something horrible, right? Unless you really do something that's like newsworthy bad, which is pretty unusual. And if you have any level of emotional intelligence, chances are you're not going to do that. But there's kind of a line out there, I guess. And I don't want to talk about authenticity because it's so cliche to be like, be authentic, right? What does that mean? But there is truth in saying that if you're going to express that you care about something, you really should back it up in very real and tangible ways for your audience. And that's what I mean by maybe over rotating sometimes. It's kind of putting out messaging or putting out a point of view, especially when it's something about like we stand for X, whatever X is. And there's clearly a ton of that going on in our world right now. But then not backing it up in the way you operate and being transparent about, hey, here's how we operate and here's how we're proving and making it tangible that we stand for that thing that we say we stand for. And again, for the most part, I find that comes through in being transparent. Like how we operate our business is in line with what we are saying we stand for. It's how we treat our employees, and here's proof of that. It's how we source materials, and here's proof of that. It's whatever it is, just being able to prove that and be transparent is really key. And where I see companies making mistakes and over rotating is what they come out really strong, beautiful messaging, beautiful point of view, but there's no evidence that they're actually caring about it or operating in a way that makes that come off as
it's just a PR statement to line up with whatever social issue du jour has landed.
That's exactly right. But if you want to make it matter, make it meaningful, you've got to kind of put some evidence and some proof behind it that's obvious and clear to your audience. And, I think part of the truth is with COVID over the last year, connection has become really important to people. And we're finding that we're able to connect in all kinds of ways that we hadn't realized before. And I think a lot of us are realizing it's important in ways maybe we hadn't realized before. But we're also in a really cynical world right now at the same time. And cynicism is real. So you've got to kind of find that way of creating connection in ways that is real to people and matters to people.
I think you mentioned something that can summarize the first half of this conversation, which is really to be a human, which is to care and have empathy and be authentic, right? And that is the opportunity to break through. It's not necessarily doing something so crazy in Clubhouse, right? If it is Clubhouse, it's something more along the lines of, connecting as a human being. Let's pivot into that area for a second and how that relates to, this change in buyers' behavior and how we adjust to it. So I'm going to throw out something there. Demand gen, ABM. Is ABM hype? And do we need to get back to demand gen? Is it a balance? Or how do you see those two strategies in terms of driving marketing output?
Yes, ABM is hype, I will say. Now, don't get me wrong. Account-based marketing is the way to go. Don't get me wrong, but it just is demand gen. It just really is. And in fact, I think it's one of those things where kind of this thing that's perceived as ABM, which is separate from traditional or standard demand gen, is going to kind of go away. And it's just going to be the way that we operate. And again, it's driven by our customers because all of our customers are humans and they're consumers too, and they have expectations that are forming all the time. And we in the B2B world have to meet those expectations, even though we're not marketing to them as consumers necessarily. They're always consumers on some level. And so what I mean by that is ABM speaks to a level of customization, a level of being highly relevant, creating great experiences that, again, are customized for audiences. If you're not doing that and you're missing that boat, you're not going to be effective at demand gen. It is just demand gen now.
So ABM creates focus for demand gen. Like get your audience, know who your target is, know them better, build an experience specific to them and personalize to them throughout that journey, know where they are in the journey, and just do that better than general broad-based wide net fishing, if you will.
That's right. You can still go broad, don't get me wrong, but within going broad, you better know your audience and you better still find ways and mechanisms to create unique experiences for them that are kind of personal and customized, if you know what I mean.
We often do kind of chase the shiny object, and it's interesting to see the perspective around ABM just being an extension of marketing muscle that we've had in the past. And let's talk about budgeting, right, and investments. I know that's a big part of what we started to talk about, right, which is, this investment that the executive team wants to claw back from a field events perspective and just, pocket it, right? When we're saying, no, we're going to need that to keep up and hit our numbers. So, just at an investment level, how have you at Tesorio, made the case for what you need and enabled you and your team to hit those numbers in this moment?
It's been a couple of ways. One is getting back to what I was talking about before, which was talking about what we need in the context of what the business obviously needs, right? I've learned in my career and through my work with other CMOs that if you talk in a marketing myopic way, you're going to meet resistance right off the bat. But if you talk in business terms, sales productivity terms, growth inflection points, those types of things, it's going to be far more effective. So what I've talked about is, hey, our sales reps are missing the opportunity to meet people face to face. They're missing the opportunity to go to industry events and network with lots of people in a short period of time. They're missing out on opportunities to do, closing dinners and roundtables and all of those things. How do we make up that gap through what marketing can do, and how can marketing help? And that's when I begin to talk about, okay, well, we need to find ways to engage more. We've got to invest more intelligently in our digital channels. We've got to create video that's engaging. We've got to make sure that we're hosting events that are digital, but provide for a great experience. And how do we do that? That includes providing excellent content that our audience connects with, but also creates an environment where people can actually talk to each other, right? And not just be kind of in an audience all the time.
Hard.
It's really hard. It's not
hard.
easy stuff. I don't know. I love B2B marketers. We're good at hard stuff. I mean, just the amount of change that's going on, but talking in those terms is really key. And again, on the product side of things, I talk a lot about customer experience and how to really think about customer experience. I think every company, at least in my space now, SaaS space, we love our product. It's a cool product. We think it's amazing, but we know that the barrier for competition and differentiation, if you're thinking about it in terms of features and functionality, is very fleeting. It's very temporary. The barrier for just about anybody to catch up in almost anything you do is pretty low. But if you are truly creating awesome experiences for your customers and they feel that you truly know them and you're making a human connection with them, especially in this remote, distributed digital world, that's hard for a competitor to replace. And they're certainly not going to be able to do it quickly. That's what I focus on when I'm talking about justifying marketing budget. Yeah, we're not spending, several $100,000s on, hosting all these events or even necessarily kind of sponsoring terrestrial events. We don't have to pay, 50 grand to build that booth anymore, sure. But we better turn that into making beautiful stuff. And that's the other part of this. B2B marketing should be beautiful too. It's not just consumer marketing. Let's double down there. Let's double down on creating good video. Again, evocative video that creates a reaction out of people and just doesn't only inform them about something. And again, the reaction I like to go for is typically humor. It's just where I'm most comfortable. But inspiring too, sometimes. That costs real money. That's a real investment. So being able to talk to leadership about those kinds of things, I tend to try to make it personal for them too. When I'm talking to my CEO, my head of sales, and other people, I talk about their own personal experiences. What engages you? What captures your attention right now? And you can see the light bulbs going off for them. They're like, yeah, you're right.
And I also think to that point of those investments, right? Especially let's just take video, like beautiful, evocative. If you're just managing to the quarter, you're going to be in a tough position. And I think, understanding where your executive team is positioned as it relates to the long view is going to be critical, because if you build a video like that, hopefully it has legs for many quarters to come.
Exactly. That's right.
Yeah. And I guess one of the last questions I have for you, Jay, is justification. I have a finance background myself, turned marketer. And I may go too far in this notion of what I call closed loop, like understanding de-anonymize attribution to anonymous, or excuse me, from anonymous to de-anonymize, behavior, how we justify our budgets in digital. Have we gone too far there? Or is this a place that we should all anchor ourselves because it creates a foundation for us to be more successful, to have a longer view in all the areas that we want to invest in going forward?
I don't think we have gone too far. Not in terms of what I'm seeing broadly. In fact, in most cases, I would say not far enough. People in general are slow to adjust to real change. It just takes us a bit to absorb things, right? And understand our current reality and how that's evolving over time. I mean, I'm dating myself in a big way, but I came up in my career at the dawn of the internet. And I remember talking to business leaders, including editors in chiefs of magazines, about like, hey, you should really invest in kind of the whole web thing, right? And it's going to be important. People being like, I can see this little bit of something happening, but it's not really going to be a place where commerce happens and people engage with each other. That's never going to be what the internet is. And it took a long time for people to catch up. And I think we're kind of always in moments like that, but especially right now. And digital is so key. And I will say this, digital with creativity, kind of old school, like getting really creative. But I believe the creativity is best applied within a context that is very targeted, right? So Do you have those personas? Do you really understand the buyer's journey? Do you have the information and the data to be creative in a way that's going to be highly relevant and hopefully productive for your target audiences? But I will say this, it's not only digital. For example, I'm finding, I talked to a lot of other CMOs, direct mail is, and this isn't new either, but
I
it's
can't believe
back.
You're saying it, Jay. I cannot
Yeah.
believe it. Direct mail. We're talking about direct mail?
We're talking about direct mail. It's huge right now. It's hard right now because guess what? Everybody's working from home.
Everyone's at
They don't
home.
necessarily know where to send stuff, but some of the firms out there that help you with this have really nifty ways of, you send a note and be like, hey, we're sending you something cool. Is this the right address? But again, not just anything, not just, not a postcard or something that's like not relevant to them. But direct mail gets a lot of attention and engages people great. And if you're hosting a virtual event, think about having something land on their desk at home during that virtual event to make it feel a little bit more tangible and more real.
It's interesting because if you think about, the conversation we just had, I think there are two ends of the spectrum here. One is like the old school, know your audience, do something unique, be creative, connect empathetically and as a human being and do that exceptionally well, because only those who do exceptionally well are going to get the attention they need to win, right? So like looking back a little bit, and the other piece is looking forward around, how we can justify our budgets, do closed loop, use these new digital technologies and tactics and strategies to engage, right? And it's the combination of both of those. So you can't really be on one side or the other. You got to have, skill sets and experience to bring those two together to be successful in this new post-COVID world.
That's exactly right. A phrase I've started using recently is I talk about audience engagement as currency, and one of the most valuable currencies there are out there. And what I'm finding is that's resonating with the people I'm talking to about it, because there's nothing a business can do very effectively if they're unsuccessful at engaging an audience. Now, certainly there are businesses that have like a perfect product market fit because they have that brilliant idea for a product. But again, that's only going to last so long. But I talk internally at Tesorio all the time about this currency of audience engagement, and that's worth investing in. And I do justify it by linking that to outcomes, certainly, and saying, look, I'm not going to be able to convert these folks if we haven't earned their attention, right? Once we earn their attention, then all of a sudden we have permission to begin to ask them to take certain actions or compel them to do certain things. And oh, by the way, it's going to make our sales team more effective and productive over time too. And one of the things I like to do, just a very tactical thing, is I am constantly looking at sales metrics, right? Sales productivity metrics in terms of, what's their success rate at engaging people that they're trying to engage with? What are the sales cycle lengths looking like? What are close rates looking like? What are our average sales prices looking like? And being able to correlate, it's never necessarily a causal direct relationship,
Yep.
especially when we're talking about these things, but be able to correlate, look, sales productivity is improving. It's easier for them to engage the audiences that they're trying to engage in their efforts. We see sales cycle lengths reducing. Oh, by the way, there's data out there. I happen to be lucky enough to have a lot of it from my time at Sirius and Forrester that shows that, look, if you have a certain level of brand affinity and identity, that is going to reduce sales cycle lengths, increase average selling prices, and make sales more productive. So always kind of trying to bring it back to those things. And not just asking people to take it on faith or that it's intuitive that this is the right thing to do, but that's part of it as well.
Yeah, it's super pragmatic, and it's going to give those decision makers a much higher level of comfort that you're heading in the right direction, even though it may be directional, not one-to-one. And that's where we got to try to get most people comfortable. Well, look, I know we're coming up on time, and I'll say this, it's clear to me why I share the introduction I did, Jay, which is, I think you are one of the sharpest minds in B2B. You've been around the block, not to call you old, but I'm going to call you sage. And I truly enjoyed this conversation. I know others will have as well. And I thank you for your time.
Well, Thad, thank you very much. It's been a lot of fun.